I'm Stephanie Macedonio.
I'm Sabrina Rubis.
And I'm Erin Kaufman, and we're here with Dr. Jeffrey Chance, Medical Corps, retired. He was in the military during the Vietnam War, and he was on active duty from July 1968 to July 1970. So to start off, we want to know what you were doing before the war.
Okay, in 1958, when I graduated high school, I went to RPI. It's an engineering school, upstate New York. That was 1958 to 1962, where I got a Bachelor of Science in Biology. And then I got accepted to medical school, because I always wanted to be a doctor. So I went to medical school in 1962 to 1966. And it just so happened that as I started my post-doctorate training at Maimonides Hospital in Brooklyn in 1966, 67, 68, was at the peak of the Vietnam War, and the military needed doctors. So I enlisted in what they called the Berry Plan, named after Frank Berry, who was a thoracic surgeon. In this plan, they give young doctors like myself the choice of what branch of service and when do you want to go in. So I picked the nicest branch of service. That was the Air Force. Their uniforms were nicer than the Army. And but when they needed me on active duty in 1968, they said the Air Force didn't need doctors. The Army did, because we were losing a lot of men in Vietnam. So they stationed me from 1968 to 69 at Fort Dix, New Jersey. Then all the doctors who were there had to go to Fort Sam Houston in Texas to learn how to shoot guns and throw hand grenades, stuff that we never did in Brooklyn or Long Island, or for that matter, the Bronx. We learned how to shoot weapons and handle ourselves on the battlefield. And then that was January 1969. 6 months later, I got orders to go to Vietnam, which would be July 69. And again, I said that the Army needed doctors, the Air Force didn't. So I was on loan, even though I was an Air Force officer, I was on loan to the Army for the 2 years of active duty. And usually I told them that if they take me in the military like this, we're going to lose this war. And sure enough, most people think we lost the Vietnam War because we tried to stop communism from spreading from North Vietnam to South Vietnam. So we sent advisors and then active duty military to South Vietnam. And it just didn't work out right the way we planned. We were out muscled. If we had 1,000 men on the battlefield, they had 8,000 to 10,000. They just seemed to have more people. And that's one of the reasons we lost the war. It just was not winnable.
Why did you prefer the Air Force over other branches? Like when they asked you which one you wanted to be a doctor?
You ever see an Air Force uniform and an Army uniform? Army is this green color. Air Force is nice and blue.
Is there
that was my reason.
Really?
I like the Air Force.
Aw.
I like the Air Force.
Did you know like any differences between the two, or is just
the Air Force obviously have less chance of combat if you're in the Air Force. But unfortunately, they loaned me to the Army, even though I was an Air Force officer.
And before you got enlisted in the Army, what were you studying to be like as a doctor?
I was studying internal medicine and cardiology.
Did you get to finish your residency before you went into serve?
No.
No.
I only did 2 years from 1960, 66 to 68. Mm-hmm. Then 68 to 70 on active duty. And then when I got discharged, then I had to go back to my training in internal medicine and cardiology.
Oh, so after you got discharged, did you finish your residency?
Yes.
Generally speaking, back then, how long did doctors study in residency for?
It depends what field you go into. Internal medicine was 3 or 4 years.
Oh, okay.
And cardiology was mixed, is a branch of internal medicine. So it's basically 4 years for internal medicine cardiology. Mm-hmm. If you're going to be a surgeon, it could be 10 years.
Yeah, because you're specialized.
Yeah. So it all depends what subspecialty you pick.
Mm-hmm. So when you went to get like specialized training for like weapons and stuff, did you get any specialized training for being like a doctor in the military or?
Well, they knew we wouldn't be a sharpshooter the way an 18-year-old kid is, because most of us were 29 or 30. But they taught us how to use machine guns and hand grenades and that stuff.
Did you have to like carry one at all times when you were?
Oh yeah, over in Vietnam, I always had a M16 and a 45 with my.
Before you went to serve, were you married or did you have any kids, or were you?
I got married in 1964, right after my second year of medical school. I got married, and let's see. Then Kerry came along. What year was Kerry?
1967.
67, all right. Just when I was ready to go on to active duty, right?
So you left a wife and a child behind when you went on to active duty?
Correct. No, well, for 1 year, they lived with me on the base at Fort Dix, New Jersey. But then when I got orders to go to Vietnam, my Linda and the kids moved in with her parents, and then I went to Vietnam.
So while you were, like, when you were getting, like, before you went to the Vietnam, like, what type of training besides, like, weapons did you have to go through?
We were told basically how to treat the war wounds. See, in civilian practice, most of us didn't treat war wounds. We didn't take malaria medicine in Brooklyn, but over in Vietnam, you have to take your chloroquine and primaquine. These are medicines for malaria, and but basically, it was to get us familiar with weapons.
And did you have to like practice working with like small amounts of like medical materials because it wasn't available, or did you have most?
What does that mean?
Like, if you were treating a wound or something and you didn't have, like, did you have the necessary tools to, like, treat, like, everything? Or did you have to,
out in the field,
work with what you had?
I had to get the men out of, if they were really injured bad, I had to get them, medevac them out from the battlefield. So I really couldn't treat the wounds, in the heat of battle.
Mm-hmm.
So for you weren't really drafted because of the Barry Plan isn't considered being drafted. That was your choice, correct?
That was my choice, right? You could say I enlisted. I volunteered for the military. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So although you weren't drafted, what were your feelings regarding the idea of being drafted, and how did you personally feel about how do you feel about the idea of forcing these young kids to go and fight?
Yeah, well, that was a big factor back in those days. You probably heard a lot of students went to Canada. They fled out. They moved out of the United States, so the military couldn't get them. But, none of us want to go into war, into battle. But those were my orders, so I did what I had to do.
Mm-hmm. Was it a difficult adjustment changing from preparing to be a doctor and then having to go and learn how to use weapons?
Right. Well, civilian life, learning medicine, you don't expect to have to be shot at every day. Where in Vietnam, there was an adjustment. It was not easy.
What were the conditions like in Vietnam? Can you explain some of them?
Yeah, I was stationed on a LZ, which means landing zone. That's where the helicopters would come in and supply us with food, ammunition, etc. And out of this landing zone, also called a fire base, we would go out into the field and try to find the enemy, which was quite easy to do because he was all around us.
So when you were over there, was it like when you were on the base where you were? Did you have to were there any attacks, or was it just like you felt sick?
Yeah, we got attacked quite often. If not every other day, every third day. We were overrun, and we lost a lot of guys.
Did you make many friends? Like, did you know any of them personally? Like, did you lose any
No.
friends? No.
You didn't have any personal ties or connections with the people that you worked with, or the guys that you worked
I
with?
mean, in Vietnam, no, because I was assigned to a battalion, the 1st Air Cavalry Division, and I never knew any of these people. And even as I got to know them, they would be killed in a day or two or next week.
So it was hard, yeah.
Yeah, you never really. It's different now, where you train as a volunteer. We have a volunteer army now, and you train with a group of soldiers, and you become buddies. And back then, it was different. I was just assigned to a battalion, which is usually like 1,000 men, and you just had no camaraderie. You just never got to be friends with them.
Do you think the training that they do is different now? Like they prepare them
Oh
better?
yeah, it's completely different. Don't forget, it's 40 years ago.
With technological advances and stuff like that.
Shooting a gun is the same thing, but we didn't have GPSs in those days. Just to name one thing, we had just maps, paper maps, which were inaccurate.
Did you have any free time when you were over there, or were you always stationed to do something? Or
Yeah, we were always. You're on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
So obviously, we know that we lost the Vietnam War, but why do you think what do you think we could have done more or better to prevent such a loss, if anything?
I don't know if we could have done anything. Yeah, we could have not started this war. I mean, but that's above my pay grade. That's I can't comment on that. Why they went the route they did, our military went the route they did.
Were the civilians at home personally affected by the Vietnam War? What was happening during that time period?
Yeah, a lot of people were, because most of the young guys in the army, they were drafted. Where now it's a volunteer army. Back in those days, they were drafted. So most families, if they didn't have somebody in the military, knew somebody in the military. Where now, I think you just said that you hardly know anybody that's in the military. It's completely different now, being that it's a volunteer military.
And did most people who were back home, did they know what was going on, or they just speculated?
Yeah, we didn't have satellites the way we have now, so a film clip of a battle scene in Vietnam would get here 24, 48 hours later after it was done or filmed, where now you could see it real time.
Were you able to write to your wife back at home?
Yeah. That, and also I even had a dictating machine, send tapes back and forth.
How did you adjust to the military life, including like physical and like social aspects when you were over in Vietnam?
Well, over there, it's different. Military life is so different than civilian life. Whether you're in the United States on an army base or you're in Vietnam, it's a different way of life.
How so?
How so? You know that the president is your boss. The president of the United States is your boss. And when you get orders, you really can't question them. Where in civilian life, if you don't like your boss, you either quit your job, but in the military, there's no such thing as that. You just follow orders.
When you went over there, were people like allowed to retreat and come back home and said like, and if they wanted out, or did they have to like stay and fight until they were ordered to come back home?
Say, repeat that question.
Like when the soldiers were over there and stuff during the Vietnam War, were they allowed to retreat and come back home, or did they have to stay over there until they were ordered to come back home? Like, was it a choice of staying that long?
And like, how long was there? Like,
most people, most GIs, young kids who were drafted back then, it's a 2-year commitment. You're drafted for 2 years. And because of the war, one of those 2 years is in Vietnam. They wouldn't make you spend more than 1 year in Vietnam unless you were a regular army. You were making the army your career. And the more combat you see, the quicker you go up the ranks and you get promoted. But basically, the average 19, 20-year-old kid, it's 2 years, 1 year in Vietnam, and 1 year at a civilian army post. Not a civilian army, an army post in the United States.
So you said that most 19 or 20-year-olds wouldn't spend more than 1 year in Vietnam. Why do you think why was that so? Why wouldn't they spend more than 1 year?
That was the normal tour. That was the protocol.
Okay.
Standard operating procedure. That's just the way it was.
So if they were drafted and they did their one tour in 1 year,
they did 1 year in Vietnam usually at the height of the war. 1 year in Vietnam and 1 year at an army base back in the United States.
So once they did that, did they like fulfill their like commitment and then they could leave?
After 2 years total military service, you then get discharged. And if you did a good job, you get an honorable discharge, versus some guys who got a dishonorable discharge because they wouldn't follow orders or they did something that was illegal or whatever.
Did you get any like special kind of treatment if you received an honorable discharge versus a dishonorable discharge, or is it just like the way they categorize? Or
Oh no, it's a big difference. You'll lose a lot of benefits if you get a dishonorable discharge. But if you do your job, you don't have to be a hero. But if you do your job and you get an honorable discharge, usually the military treats you okay. Post-military duty.
Did you get an honorable discharge?
Yeah, I got an honorable discharge, right.
What were some of, you said that they treated you like differently, like how so? What were some of like the perks of getting an honorable discharge or being characterized as that?
Well, a lot of, when you get out of the military, if you get a dishonorable discharge, right away that's telling future employers that you did something wrong. So it affects your whole civilian life after you get out of the military. A lot of companies won't hire you if you have a dishonorable discharge. I'm not sure if you lose certain benefits, such as Social Security. I'm not sure about that. But it affects your civilian life after the military. So you got to be a good boy. And the reason I say you got to be a good boy is because very few girls, only nurses went to Vietnam, I think. Very few women were in Vietnam compared to, Iraq, Afghanistan that we have now, which is because it's a volunteer army. So you only have people who are making the military a career, that be it a guy or a girl. So yeah, you just gotta follow orders.
Why do you think there was such a large gender imbalance for like the female and male ratio that fought in Vietnam? Was that just the nature of the times?
Right. Okay, let's leave it at that. That's above my pay grade.
Because like in school we learned that like as like in World War One and World War Two, like more women started getting involved in the war, and it like seemed like that, not like that they were like better than like equal with the men, but they were getting more.
The norms of our society were different back in the 60s and 70s. As far as women in the military, and then women in combat. I don't think there were any women assigned to a combat unit in Vietnam. There were women in the military, and there might be nurses or some administrative type work, but not in combat, not the way they are now. You have women now who are helicopter pilots, fighter pilots. I mean, it's different now.
Back then, do you think women had a desire to be in combat, or no?
I think that's when the women's movement started, back in the 70s, 60s and 70s. That was the start of it, yeah.
Did you work with any women, since you were like a doctor and most of, you said?
No, so I was on a combat unit.
So you were in the combat unit?
Yeah, when I was at Fort Dix, New Jersey, for 1 year, we had a lot of, women nurses. They were in the nurse corps. I was in the medical corps. Yeah, but not in Vietnam. It was different.
So when you were over there, what was like the most memorable thing that you remember, like that stuck with you? Like,
I'd rather not get into that.
What year did you come back home?
The end of '69.
The end of 69. Can you tell us what happened when you came back home? Like what civilian life was like, and or how you felt you changed, or how?
I'd rather not get into it.
okay. So when you got back, like how like did you adjust like back with your family?
Yeah, there was an adjustment period because after seeing what you see in combat, it's different. It's different in civilian life.
So when you came back from Vietnam, did you finish your residency in medical school?
I finished my residency, right.
Mm-hmm. You had 2 more years left?
I had 2 more, right.
And then you started to practice?
Then I moved down to Florida and I started practicing, right.
There are so many misconceptions about the Vietnam War.
Getting back to that dishonorable and honorable discharge, one of the benefits of the military is that there's the GI Bill. I don't know how it works now, but back then they paid me an extra $200 a month to finish my training, knowing that
as a result of having the honorable discharge.
Right. If you still had schooling to complete what the military interrupted, they helped you along by giving you $200. Mine was, I think, $200 a month, which back in '69 it would be like $2,000 a month.
Oh wow!
So it was helpful.
Yeah.
There are so many misconceptions about the Vietnam War. Is there anything that you would like to clear up about regarding that?
That's above my pay grade. I mean, I'm looking at the war through what I saw, and how can I criticize the people, Congress and the president for what they did? Most of us knew it was not a winnable war. There was just no way that we were going to win. Most people felt that way.
So why do you think that they continue to send people and guys?
It's the military-industrial complex. It's that goes way above my pay grade.
So once you were so it was once they did they feel that they made a wrong decision by doing that, and they were already too deep into the war?
I think so. I
They
think
could do about it.
I think back in after the war ended, I think it was 1974. As the years went on, 74, 84, I think we realized that it was a mistake.
So how long did the Vietnam War last?
It started in the early 60s to 70s. It's about almost 10 years. About 10 years.
So you were, like, when it was peaking,
I was there when it was peaking, yeah. It peaked, like, from 65 to 70. That was the peak.
Why were those 2 years considered like the peak years of the war? Like what
Well, that's
specifically
when
happened?
they had the most men over there.
About
We
how
had
many?
500,000 men.
Versus how many did they?
Versus Iraq, Afghanistan was 100 or 200,000. Yeah.
Do you think that because like we had so many less men than what they had, that was obviously like played a major factor in why we lost the war? Or were
That's one factor,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah. We just weren't fighting the war. It was an unwinnable war. See, the Viet Cong, which is North Vietnam, when they were coming down to South Vietnam to take it over, it was in their heart. They wanted to win. They wanted we did not have it in our heart. I think we wanted to win, but they had a greater desire to win the war than we did.
Why do you think that they had a greater desire than we did?
I'm really not sure about that. It's the culture, or I really don't know.
After returning home, you said that you didn't stay in touch with any of the men that you were there.
No.
at all.
Well, they were either killed or I never got to know them. Because everything was so fluid. You might be with the same person at least in my situation, you might be with one person for a week or 2 weeks. And then for some reason he's transferred out, you're transferred out, he gets killed, whatever. There was no continuity.
Do you think since we had been like winning so many wars like previously to the Vietnam War that we like felt we were like confident going in, and we like felt that we had a good chance to win, and that was one of the reasons that?
I'd like to think that, because for our leaders to send us over there without a plan to win, their plan though had a lot of holes in it. It was just unwinnable the way it was fought.
Like after that, since like you said it was like one of the first wars that we actually lost, did people think like
It's the
less
first war
of-
that I know that we lost.
Did people think like less of our military that we lost that war?
Yeah, see now when you see, no, I'm not going to get into that. Well, we were called baby killers, and we were ashamed to wear a uniform in public. If you go into an airport, military, the average citizen didn't want anything to do with you because they hated the war. They hated what a military person, even they didn't know I was a doctor. For all they knew, I was a combat soldier. There was a lot of bad blood between civilians in the States and our military then. Where now, they're welcomed home.
Would you say back then that people didn't really appreciate the duty that you like served? And
Right.
if so, why do you think they didn't understand or appreciate like the way we appreciate it
Because the
today?
I don't know, I'm looking at it, hindsight, because it was an unwinnable war. We spent billions and billions of dollars. 58,000 Americans were killed over there. For what? I don't know. What did we get out of it? Not too. Right now, South Vietnam, Saigon is now called Ho Chi Minh City. it's a communist country. So what did we accomplish all these years later? Nothing.
Do you feel as though the training that they received differed from the training that our soldiers received, and that could have played a major effect in why we lost, or do you think the trainings were unequal?
No, we had the best training, but not the best training to fight that kind of war.
Or like their mentality was different. Like,
Yeah,
they were like,
they had a different perspective. They wanted to die.
Like they were
One of
willing-
our generals says, "You don't win wars by dying for your country. You make the other poor bastard die for his country."
so like they thought by dying for their country that they were like heroic.
What's that?
Like by dying for their country, like that was heroic to them.
Yeah. It was.
So like after like some of the previous wars, like when the soldiers would come home, like not a lot of people would talk about it, and they would just go back into like their normal lives. Like, did that happen with the Vietnam War, or did like people like express?
See, we were fighting this war with one hand tied behind it. Like when we ended World War II with the nuclear bombs over Japan. I mean, that took guts for our president to do that. Here, we outlawed napalm. We outlawed this. You can't shoot here. You can't do this. We had so many rules and regulations that it hindered whatever ability we had to win the war. We had too many rules and regulations.
So you felt that our rules hindered us in that?
Yes.
How did your wartime experiences affect your life, if you want to talk about it, after you came back and returned to civilian life with your family and your two kids?
I get it.
That
would be a good question for Linda.
But we're not gonna ask her that. So when you came back from war and you completed like your residency and all that stuff, and did you just like forget and not think about the war? Or you just went on like to become a doctor and work as like a cardiologist?
You always remember.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any good experience that you had, because you were a doctor, so obviously you helped not repair people, but you helped like make them better? Is there any good experiences that you could recall that you'd want to share with us?
A few,
Mm-hmm.
but more negative than positive.
Yeah, being that it's a war and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Having experienced war firsthand, would you say that you're for war, or are you completely against it? Where's your stance on it?
No, I'm for a war if it's fought for a good reason, and you fight it to win. I mean, not all these rules and regulations. In a situation where the war is unwinnable. The joke we had in Vietnam was it was a guerrilla warfare. And that's the problem. We were fighting guerrillas. We weren't fighting the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's a joke. We were fighting guerrillas. There were guerrillas.
Do you...
Okay, so do you think that when you were over there, and like did you think the fact that they were drafted into the war, like that they weren't necessarily like they wanted to be in the war, had an impact on how we fought the war?
No.
Because people today, they like want to fight for their country, and since these people were drafted,
Right.
that had a
From my experience, I'd say 75% of the young soldiers over there did not want to be there. They didn't see any benefit to the war. And I was going to get into the Gulf of Tonkin, why we escalated, why we got into the war.
Mm-hmm.
We claimed back in the early 60s that North Vietnam, as they were taking over South Vietnam, North Vietnam fired on some military vessels in the Gulf, and that was our excuse to get into the war really big. It was called the Gulf of Tonkin. These were not military combat vessels that were fired upon.
You said that you're for war if we're fighting for good reasons. What were some of the...
Like Afghanistan is stupid.
You think, why do you feel as though that's stupid? Or you're not?
Because you don't have to have NASA take us to the moon. If you want to see what the moon looks like, the surface of the moon, that's Afghanistan. It's the Russians were kicked out of Afghanistan with no results, and that's an unwinnable war because you have this Taliban and now Al Qaeda, and you have these groups that they want to die for their cause, and their heart's in the fight. It's a waste.
Yeah.
Just like Iraq, we went in because of supposedly weapons of mass destruction. Did you guys study that stuff yet?
No, we haven't. Not in our history class this year yet.
Oh, it's not important, obviously. I mean, it only happened 15 years ago.
Do you think...
How could they not teach you about Afghanistan and Iraq? It's in your lifetime. I could see Vietnam is not in your lifetime. So it's almost like it never happened. But here, you lived through Afghanistan and Iraq. But they don't teach you about it?
We haven't learned it yet in our...
Well, when are you going to learn it?
Right now, we're on World War II and Nazism in Germany.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
well, hurry up.
So do you think that, like, I know, like, we get involved in these work because we think we're helping them, but do you think, like, we overstep our boundaries sometimes?
Yeah, we want to look like the good guys on the block or in the world. So we get into situations that we shouldn't be involved in because there's no solution. Sometimes there are problems in life and in the world where there is no solution. And a lot of times you can, with all good intentions, you're going to make things worse. Be it Vietnam, Iraq. Look what happened in Iraq. It's ridiculous. All those lives lost, money spent for what? The same problem, a worse problem exists. At least he was a tyrant, Saddam Hussein. He was a tyrant, so he kept everybody in line. Now it's a lawless state. You got the ISIS, you got Al Qaeda. It's a religious war because you got Sunni and what's the other group of people? I guess that's above my pay grade.
Do you think people see us this way? Like, we want people to think we're, like, powerful and we can help people. Do you think that other countries...
Well, we are
see
powerful.
Yeah.
But if you don't use your power in a logical way, then you're wasting it. I mean, yeah, we can defeat any country. We can with the power we got. But why? For what reason? We could have won Vietnam, but there were too many rules and regulations. We didn't fight it to win. I think we fought it to show the rest of the world that, hey, we don't want communism to spread, so we're going to help the South Vietnamese.
Can you think of any of the rules and regulations off the top of your head that might have affected, like, the overall outcome? Like you said, there's too many, but what?
Yeah, there are too many. It's just the rules of combat, you get too many rules and regulations. But if you're a good soldier, you got to follow them. If you're told to do something, you do it.
Do you think these rules and regulations still exist today?
Yeah.
Or are they?
Yeah.
Do you think they're worse or better?
Well, like we
That's
didn't
number one.
win. Did we win Iraq? Did we win Afghanistan? I don't know. We changed the landscape a little bit in the thinking, but we haven't won anything.
The landscape.
These people who, like, if they felt like they could better serve their country without following these rules and regulations, were those the ones who were, like, dishonorably discharged?
Yeah, if you don't follow them, you get into trouble. So either get court-martialed or followed by a dishonorable discharge. So you really, once you're in the military, you got to follow rules and regulations. Unless it's become so obvious that you could explain it to your superiors why the decision they made is wrong. You try to reason. You can try to reason with your superiors, but they're superiors for a reason. They're your boss. So you really have to follow rules and regulations.
Do you feel as though a lot of people left with honorable discharge, or just honorable discharge?
95% left with an honorable, or maybe more than 95%.
Is there anything else that you would like to add or tell us before we end this interview?
No.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.